Welcome everyone to our class on Sefer Melitza. This is the third and last Sefer that we'll be doing from Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. Here he's going to be explaining how to move the heart. Before we were involved in Sefer Higayon, and the purpose there was to strip away all the clothing around the statement and break it down to its essential message, its no-say, its subject, what is it saying about the subject, etc. The Sefer Melitza is going to do two things. One, it's going to explain to us how to communicate information which cannot always be communicated in a simple way. For instance, we'll use mashalim, comparisons and metaphors. The other important part of the Sefer is that he's going to teach us how to use language to motivate, because it's not often that people hear things, but they don't hear them in the right tone. They don't hear how significant it is. For instance, if a person raises his voice, that's an indication that what he's trying to say now is more significant than if his voice was just at a normal tone. So we're going to investigate this aspect of speech, and we're going to see how the Ramchal presents the information. The chart before us is the beginning of course, the chart that I'm creating going through the Sefer. And again, with the Ramchal, what's difficult is, since he breaks things down from Klal to Prat, and from that Prat to more Pratim, all the way down, it's sometimes very hard to appreciate the scope of the Sefer unless you've gone through the whole book itself. So we're going to start off with this chart, and we'll be modifying it and adding additional boxes and changing it around, but it's a good place to start. Now, the Ramchal in the beginning is going to define two functions that a person has when he talks. One is going to be the function of a communicator. He wants to express the idea that's in his mind and transmit it accurately to the listener. And the second part is what he calls ritzui, or motivation. It means he wants the person who's listening to understand the message clearly and to understand its value. Understand its value, meaning that he'll actually do what you say. You can know the truth, but it doesn't mean you're going to act on it. So we're going to go through a whole interesting Sefer of the Ramchal, who's going to teach us how to use our language in order to motivate others, not only just to communicate clearly, which we have to do, but to motivate others to understand the significance of what we're saying. So that's the two basic functions, and he's going to explain to us that, of course, the tools that we use to communicate and to motivate are overlapping. Some of them are unique to the communicator, some are unique to the motivator, and there's an area of overlap. So he's going to have to explain to us the unique rules of each function, as well as the complex, the common rules that they both have. When he breaks down speech, whether it's going to be functionally as a communicator or a motivator, he talks about these two basic parts, which we've seen in Dr. Gemara. It's mentioned often in his forum, which is inyan and milos. Inyan means the content of what you're trying to say, and the milos is the words you're using to express them. And on each side, he's going to explain to us how to evaluate whether our job is going to be accomplished properly, whether we're expressing the Inyan that we're whether the Inyan that we're expressing is valuable, i.e. it's true or false, whether it's known or not known. That'll be his breakdown of the Inyan, of the content. And then he'll go into a discussion of the words that we use to express ideas, their quantity, their quality, quantity, and then the seder, the steps that you use to present your material. So without further ado, let's go into the Sefer. Now again, with the Ramchal, it's very easy to get lost because there's many divisions and subdivisions. So we're going to hold on to the chart a little. I'll try to make it like a half chart and bring it up, and that'll keep us focused. Okay, so I'm just going to get that like that and spread out, and we'll make it a little smaller and move it over a little if I can. Doesn't seem like I can for some reason. Okay, let me slide it over this way. And then we'll open up Melitza. If I could open up Melitza, I would. Let's see why it's not opening. That's why. Okay, there we go. And we'll keep that on top. Try that. Okay, there we go. Now all we use the right Sefer and we'll be okay. This is the wrong Sefer. We need Melitza. Okay, sorry for this technical problem. Seems that we're having a little technical problems today. Let's open up Melitza. There we go. And we'll close down. Okay, that was a lesson how to manipulate windows, which I hope I'll be able to accomplish here. Okay, almost there, leaving it on. Okay. So let's start. The Ramchal says the following. B'yoshikvar kodem asaknu b'bir darke haskala v'chukasea shehu meleches higayon yigil lanu ata kafi haseda hativi'i levayer darke hadibor umishpatav shehu haba bahadraga acher haskala כי אולם מה שיקנה אדם בעצמו על ידי השכלה, יקנהו אחר כך לאחרים על ידי הדיבור. The Ramchal says the following. Since we already discussed the ways to understand information and all their laws, that's to discover information and all their laws. We did in Higayon. We figured out how to create statements and proofs and how to analyze them. So he says now, according to the normal order of things, we're going to talk about how to present those ideas. Dakir, Dibor, Mishpatav, and all their laws, which follows naturally after in level after the first part, which is intellectual understanding. Why? Because what a person acquires for himself by way of his analysis, he's going to have to now have others acquire by the way of his speech. So there's the first part of Higayon was the mental analysis, and also what we said was the Hamsoa was the creative activity of discovering ideas and analyzing ideas. So that we did in Higayon. He told us how to use those 21 terms in order to discover new information. Now that we have what we want to say, we understand our subject, we understand its parts, all its causes, etc. Now we would like to present that information. Presentation of information means that what we already have learned, we have to now impart to someone else. So we're going to have to now, this being the second phase, which is communicating your ideas after you discover them. So we're going to now discuss the methods of clear communication, which is very, very important in everything that we do, from learning to relationships with our family and our business.
Right, well that's one of the...
He says like this.
You hear people sometimes talk to each other and they're not really talking to each other. And that's because they're really not using the right words or the right ideas, and they're not expressing themselves properly. So I guess that's what we'll see here.
Exactly. That's the point. The point is you may understand something, but it doesn't mean that you are expressing the idea clearly so the person who is listening gets the idea. We have this problem on both sides. We have the problem of the presenter and the problem of the person who's listening, the lecturer and the person who's listening, whatever you want to say those two parts are. And they both have problems, but we're going to try, according to Ramchal, is going to try to have us focus on the role of the presenter, that he'll be in such a way that he'll be able to make sure that his ideas are being expressed properly. And then the recreation on the side of the hearer is another problem, but at least we have to make sure that the material is being presented clearly. So he says like this. He takes the general concept of speech and he divides it into two parts. Harishan hu Haggadah. The first he calls Haggadah, which I translate as communication. V'hu sheyetzeh v'yigaleh adam b'lashano ma b'machshavato v'yagia l'shomea oso tziur atzmo shemitzayin b'sichlo. A beautiful phrase. What does Haggadah mean? It means that you express and reveal with your language what you are thinking. And that concept that you're thinking reaches the person who is listening, and he reconstructs the same picture that you had in your mind. So Rabbi Goldstein was fond of saying the thought, word, thought formula. You have a thought in your mind, then you have to transmit that thought. That thought. So you have to now translate that thought into words in such a way that the hearer will be able to reconstruct exactly what you were thinking. So that's the first part. That's called using language to communicate. But there's a second part. V'hasheni hu haritzui, motivation, ratzon, getting someone's desire to act on what you're saying. V'hu sheyishtadel adam laha'ir b'lev chavaro teshuka l'davama ad yidei tainot sheyiton lo v'hasata sheyasitehu. So the second part, motivation, is when a person tries to arouse someone's heart to desire what the speaker is trying to transmit by offering him claims and by arousing him. So there's two parts. There's the arousal of the other, there's the communication and there's arousal. Now, in our modern world, unfortunately, rhetoric has been used to the detriment of a lot of people. We can think of a lot of examples of people who use rhetoric to motivate people for very nasty goals. But, however, because nasty people use things, well, if it was true that we shouldn't use what nasty people use, then we wouldn't use telephones and radios and pens and pencils either. So, although rhetoric has a bad reputation in some circles, we have to use it, because if we don't understand it, then if we don't understand how to motivate, then our words will not have the impact on people, whether it be our children, wives, coworkers, whatever, so that they will able to to awaken themselves to the importance of what's being said. So that's the second part. The second part is ritzui. So he says nimsa, he makes a conclusion, ma'betamin rishon haseichel. The outlook of the first one, the Haggadah, the communicator, is the mind, and the second one, the motivator, is the will. Remember, we have to gain the hearts and minds of the people. So, and both things are necessary. Why? Ki hamagid yitkaven shetukabal hagadaso b'seichel shomo v'yitztara bo ha'inyan sheyagid kefi ma sheyagidehu. The person, the communicator, his goal is to that is the information that's in his mind, or the concept that's in his mind, should be created in the mind of the listener, according to the words that he's using. He wants clear communication. The martzeh, the person who wants to motivate, his kavana, his intention is lahatot ratzon shamo, to move the desire of the listener to that which he's trying to motivate him to do. Okay, so very, very, very two important things. If you make error either one of these things, you're not going to get your result. If your communication skills are poor, then you won't be able to communicate your ideas properly. And if your motivational skills are poor, you won't get anyone to listen to the significance of what you're saying. So now the Ramchal goes a little further, and he says the following: Ubehiyoscho tivi umuskal rishon sha'osek shiadaber ma im yirtze lahasliach ba'osiko tzarech sheyashvei hishtalaso el teva hadavar shu osek bo. He says, since it's a natural rule and a muskal rishon, which is an axiom, that anyone who deals with any subject matter, if he wants to be successful in what he's doing, so he has to understand he has to understand and try to understand the very nature of that which he's doing. According to the various thing that he's trying to learn, so that's how he's going to have to exert himself. So he says the following. What does that mean here? That was a general statement. The person, the communicator, what he has to work on is to understand the nature of thought and how ideas are pictured in the mind. V'yabit el mashu kal lo liatziro uma shekasha alav. He has to investigate, he has to observe what things make it easier and more difficult for a clear communication to be transmitted. באופן שיסדר הגדסו בדרך שיקל אל השכלה. So he wants to communicate ideas. He has to understand what type of words will transmit that idea in the easiest way, so that he'll be able to organize his composition or his speech in a way that the listener will have an easy time to understand what he's saying. And he has to know on the opposite side of the coin what he should avoid so that the listener will not find it difficult to understand what he's trying to communicate. Okay, so that's one of the functions of the Sefer, is going to spell out how to make communication, Haggadah, easier and what to watch out for so that our communication won't be difficult. So that's on the side of the Maggid. He has to understand what causes clear communication and what causes difficult communications. What makes communication easier and what makes it more effective. The Melitza, the motivator, what does he have to look out for? Yashkif el teva haratzon, the chofetz henoshim. Well, he has to understand, he has to observe, how does the will of a person work and how does a human desires work? Because since he wants to motivate, he's going to have to know the rules of the heart. What makes a person wake up and get excited and get interested in what you have to say? That's the question of the heart. V'yabit el machlisho u'maksito. So the Melitza yashkiv al teva haratzon of the chafetz enoshi has to understand how the nature of desire works and how people desire what do they desire. Gvulav v'mikrav, all the definitions and all the different variations that go into it. The Abit El Machlishav, on the other hand, you have to also observe what is Machlish Umadziko, what, after you know the nature of how the heart works, you have to also understand what makes that nature more difficult to be aroused and what makes it easier to be aroused. באופן שיסד רצויו בדרך שיערהו בכוח ויכבוש אותו ויטהר אל אשר חופץ. Okay, so once he understands how the nature of the heart works, then he'll be able to organize his composition in order to motivate people to be awakened to do what he has to say and to not do what he says not to do. Okay, so that's going to be the work of the Melitza. So he now concludes, Nimsa l'meidim, שיסוד חוקס הדיבור ומשפטיו הוא מה שהסברה בטבע השכלה והשכלתו וחפץ בהסערוסו. So he says like this. As a conclusion, we have to say the following. The foundation of the laws of speech and all its rules has two parts. We have to clarify the teva of the seichel, the haskalaso, how the mind works in understanding what's being broadcast, so we get a clear message across. And the second, how the heart works, and how the person's desire works, so that we'll be able to motivate the person to follow after the truth and the correct principles. Ukafi mashis parsem lono miyos kain nisade v'naroch diberenu l'shlog bam b'chefetzenu. According to what we ukafi mashis nit parsem lono mayhem, what we learn from these rules, then we'll be able to masada, to organize and arrange our speech to conquer a person's desire, okay, to get those negative qualities which prevent a person from doing what he should be doing for his own benefit, and to help him overcome those things. So he says the seichel, we have to have, in order to do that, we have to have the seichel likvo abol atzir shenir likvo. We're going to have to focus on two parts. One, we're going to have to understand how to communicate to the person's mind in order so that the picture that's in our mind will be clearly communicated. And secondly, we're going to have to know how to misara, to awaken the desire of the person to go after what is intellectually correct. Okay, and those are the two very, very important parts of speech, and he's going to tell us the rules of clear communication and the rules of motivation. So he says the following: Nimsa ulam yibatzenu. Now, however, we find chukim yuchadim lamagid. There's going to be certain unique principles for the communicator. V'chukim yuchadim lamartzeh. There's going to be certain unique principles that are going to apply to the motivator. Kol echad kefi osko v'tachliso. Each one according to his purpose and the work that he's doing. Okay, the work of the communicator, we said, is communicating. The work of the martzeh is motivation. So we're going to find unique rules for each one. We'll also find rules which are common to both of them. V'ikar zeh, ki omnam hamartzeh kamosh tzarech la'ir haratzon, kach yitzarech gam ken la'askil es hashomo ma'ashir tzelaskilo. Why is this true? Because even though the martzeh, the motivator, wants to, his goal is motivation, but just like he has to motivate, he has to be able to transmit the idea to the other person's mind clearly. You know, what are you going to be motivated to do? So you have to be clear about that. She has siba lahaya, that the information that you're trying to communicate will be the cause of the hisaris of the other person, of the arousal of the other person. Okay. Ulufnim b'siyat d'shmayin isvara kol zeh hapratut. And within the Sefer, I'm going to explain all these rules. Okay. So that's a very important beginning. He's outlined his tachlis here. He's going to tell us how to communicate through the use of speech. It's not good enough just to understand things. We also have to communicate them clearly. And he's told us we're going to have to focus on the two parts of communication. One is of speech. One is to communicate clearly, and the other one is to motivate, so that the people will actually do what you're saying. Okay, so that's his introduction. Now here he is. So here on this little chart here, I'm going to put this away here. Speech in general, he's told us, is Haggadah and Ritzui. Okay, communication and motivation. Now he's going to tell us. He's going to break speech down, whether you're trying to communicate or motivate. Since you're going to use language is going to break into two essential parts. And we've seen this in Dr. Gemara, we've seen this, of course, in the Ramchal's books. It's going to be inyan and milos, the two things that we use language for is to clothe an idea, a concept, and to communicate that idea in words. So let's see what he says over here. He says, "V'tzarich sheteda sheyesh shtei havchanot." Remember here, he's havchana. If I had to say one of the key words in the Ramchal is havchana, aspects. Breaks things down into their two basic aspects here. Tzarich sheteda shestei havchanos nivchanot b'chol dibur sheyeh. He says there's two aspects that we can discern in any speech, in any use of language that exists. The first one is called the inyan, or the content, and the second one is called the milot, the actual physical words. The inyan, hu, hanirtze v'nirmaz b'diborahu. The content is what is being asked for and hinted at in the words. Now that's an important concept because words are a expression of ideas. You can say the same concept with many different words. So the words that we use are trying to communicate the concept. So there's the concept and then there's the words we're going to use. So first you have to be clear about those two parts. There's the inyan, what is the content of what you want to say, and then how are you expressing them? Which words are you going to use to express those ideas? So that's what he says. The inyan hu hanirtze v'nirmaz b'diro. The inyan is the content that we're trying to express, and the words are mashuhu yispareh ha'inyan hanirtze. Those are the words that we use in order to clarify that that inyan, that content. Those are the words we're going to use. That's going to be the means that the content gets transmitted. So let's go a little deeper, says the Ramchal, and let's look at this inyan. So here we have the inyan over here. It's the content and the words being used. Now we're going to look, of course, the Ramchal always likes to categorize things in large categories and break them down into small categories, smaller categories. So he says when it comes to the inyan, we're now going to discern one of the mikrim called echos. Inyan tivchan od havchana echas v'hu ha'echos. In the inyan, we're going to look at the another aspect, and that's called echos.
So what was
and in
so?
Mila, we're going to decide. We're going to.
Yeah, Inyan Inyan had another havchana. I think did I miss that?
Yeah. In other words, we broke speech into inyan and milos, right? Now we're going to look at inyan, and we're going to look at we're going to investigate it in the term of its echos. Remember one of the 9 mikrams, echos. We're going to talk about the quality of the inyan. When it comes to the words, we're going to talk about not only the quality, but the amount and the seder.
Right.
Okay, he's going to explain all these terms. You see what we're holding in the chart? So inyan, milos. Okay, now let's go to the inyan side, the right-hand side of the column. He says we're going to now have to talk about the quality of the inyan.
Right.
Okay. Now we go to the milos side. We're going to talk about the kamas, echos, and the seder. Okay. So I put in gray things that just make the outlining. But of course, I just repeat it. The outlining I do is nothing more than add numbers here or outlining marks here, but I don't change the text. If I do change the text, like over here, just to make it clear the main category, so I put it in gray. Okay, so when it comes to the inyan, he said, let's look at the echos inyan. What does it mean, the echos of the inyan? Hu hios emitio kozev o meforsam o bilti meforsam. He says when we analyze content of our communication, we should analyze it according to the following two aspects. Is what we're trying to communicate, the content that we're trying to communicate, true or false? Is it known or unknown? What does it mean, known or unknown? Ki yozdava nodelakol ain't tzarich raya alav. If the content we're trying to communicate, everyone knows, so then we don't need to bring a proof. But if it's bilti nodelakol, if people don't know the truth of it, then we're going to have to la'amto, we're going to have to prove it with one of our, remember, hakeshim. Okay? So that's what he says. When you're trying to analyze, you're going to give now your presentation. Let's analyze, first of all, he says, the content. Is what we're trying to communicate true or not? Well, if it's meforsam true, if it's axiomatic, so then we won't need to bring a proof to it. But if it's not something that's well known, before some, well known, so then we're going to have to bring proofs. Okay, so in the presentation already of our material, let's look at the content that we're trying to communicate, and then we'll say, okay, first of all, is it true or false? Very good. Why is it true or false? Remember, we learned in Derek Tfunos, the source of truth, okay? Whether it's Teva, whether it's agreement, or whether it's Hekesh. Now, in our communication, if it's something that our audience knows already to be true, that means it's before some, then we won't have to bring a proof. But if it's something that our audience is in doubt about, or does not know that it's true, or thinks the opposite, then we're going to have to prove our point by bringing proofs to the verification that we spoke about. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to do in analyzing your communication. Look at the content, analyze whether it's true or not, and whether it's accepted as true or not. If it's accepted as true or not, we won't have to bring a proof, but if it's not accepted as true, we're going to have to bring a proof. Now, as far as the words are concerned in our presentation, we're going to have to look at it in terms of the Kamos, Echos, and the Seder. What does that mean? Kamos. Kamos hamilos hu hamispar hamilos shiugad behema inyan yirtzeh. We're going to have to count the words we're using in order to express our ideas. He's going to explain this much in greater detail later on. Using too few words will give an insufficient, will create an insufficient picture in the mind of the hearer. Using too many words will confuse the hearer. So we're going to have to count our words carefully and make sure that we use just the proper amount of words, okay? That's Kamos HaMilos. Now we're going to talk about the Eichut of the Milos. So he says like this, Teva HaMilos Kafi Harasan B'Lashon. We have to check out what do our words mean, Umash, according to the natural definitions of words, Umash Yitzur Mehem Etzel HaShomea Oson, Vehino Hios Muvueres HaInyan Hei Teva Lo, Hiosam Kalos Havana Okashos. Well, we're going to now look at the vocabulary that we're using. Are we using the proper words, the proper vocabulary words to express the thoughts in our minds? Or are we going to throw off the listener by using an improper word to express our ideas? Now, we have to know, are our words going to be muvu eres ha'inyan hei teva lo? Will the words that we're using, are they sufficient to clarify the concept that we're trying to communicate? Number two, are the words that we're using easy to understand or difficult to understand? He's going to explain to us a little later on that, of course, we would try to pick the simplest words to express our ideas, because if we pick words that are more difficult to express the ideas, we're going to lose people along the way. Okay, so he says, just one second, I want to close the door a second here. So that's the other way that we have to evaluate our vocabulary, to make sure that the words we're using are clear and simple. The third aspect that we're going to have to look at is the Seder. That means how we organize our material. Seder bo'an b'mamar hakadim le'echo. What we put first and what we put second. A little article that we write for Mishpacha, so I always have a beginning, middle, and an end. So the people who comment on it, one person said, "Oh, I finally got it. There's a beginning, middle, and an end." Why? Because it's a picture article. People just think just a bunch of random pictures, but it's actually a story, and it has a seder. So when we're trying to communicate clearly, we should put the general principles first, as he said, and then the subcategories second. Okay, and we have to worry about the way that we organize the preface, the introduction, and the body, clause and prots, etc. So these are the things that he's going to be explaining in more depth, but that's the general overview. Okay. So let's look at what he just did on this chart so we don't get lost. He told us so far that there's two functions of speech, and that's to communicate and to motivate. They're both essential, and they have unique and shared laws. And now he tells us no matter what we want to do, whether that's to communicate or motivate, we always have to first check our content. What is it that we want to say? What's the quality of the content that we have? Is what we're saying something that people accept naturally or not? And the difference will be whether we have to bring proofs or not in communicating our ideas. And then we have to look at the second part of our communication, which is the actual words we're going to choose. We have to choose the words carefully. We have to make sure that the words actually mean what we're trying to express. They're clear, and also that they are simple and not obscure words, or else we're going to lose our audience. Okay, so that's as far as we got up to now. Let's go a little further. You see how important this is. I mean, these are ground rules. I mean, we've known it. I mean, as you go through life and you do things, you pick these things up here and there. But the point of the Ramchal is to organize things so that it becomes a very, very powerful tool instead of just getting ideas here and there. And then you're also able to consciously present your material and think before you speak and make sure that what you're doing is going to communicate your ideas and not you just be talking to yourself. Okay.
Yeah. And what's interesting, though, is a lot of it sounds like it's subjective. I'm waiting to see how he's going to make an objective rule out of things like don't use too many words or too few words. You know, a lot of that is up to the listener and up to the speaker. Some people, you know, that's. But
he's, believe it or not, going to exactly address himself to your question,
right?
Which is how do you do that? What's called more and what's called less? And he's going to talk about it, Baruch Hashem. He's going to tell us what to look out for, and he's going to explain to us when we should be brief and when we should elaborate. Okay, that's his job. Unbelievable, but it's true. Okay, so that's what he says. Now, the last thing we say it now. And so now here we go a little further. Now, hine b'chol havchanot ha'elu, all these havchanot that I've just told you about, yimotze tikun v'hefsed. Isn't that amazing? That's exactly what you just brought up. He predicted what you would be thinking. In all these aspects that we just brought up, you're going to find things that improve your communication and things that make you and destroy your communication. What does that mean? Ki mitzad kol echas mehavchanas elu efshar shi'azor hamedaber lahasig hatachlis asher hu rotze lahasig devaro ve'efshar yefriya mimenu. In each one of these aspects, we're going to find out that there are things which are going to help the speaker get to his aim, to his goal, and help him communicate his ideas through his speech. And there's also going to be things that cause interference and prevent him from getting his goal of transmitting his idea clearly. Ki hine b'kol echad me'elu, all these bechinos that we talked about, yimotze ma shiakel al haskalat tzir hadaba, we'll find principles which will make it easy for us to communicate the concept that we're thinking about, hamukavan v'yikvu bo al hanachon, and to establish it properly in the person who is listening. V'yamatzeh ma shiakshir, we'll find also, will bring up things that will make that communication very difficult, the communication of that accurate picture difficult, v'yimatzeh ma sheyaksheh lav hatziur hazeh v'lo yifal bo hakarui. And we're going to find things that are going to make the communication difficult, and therefore the picture won't be transmitted clearly. V'chein yimotze ma sheyoel lahamshich hachefetz el asher yivakesh. We're going to find things which are going to help us draw people's desire to what we're trying to communicate. Umash yaziklo. And we're going to find things which are going to damage the person who is listening, his desire from following what you have to say. So this is one of the things that, well, we should teach about in marriage counseling and in family counseling too, huh? Okay, but that's the truth. The truth is that there's what you have to say, but then there's whether you're going to be successful or not. So you have to know the rules of what makes your ideas easier to communicate, what makes them more difficult to communicate, what makes it easier, the language that you use will be easier to motivate, and those things which are going to make motivation more difficult. ועל כן, לפי כל הבחנות האלו יצטרכו חוקים ומשפטים לדיבור. So according to all these havchanos that we just spoke about, quality, quantity, comma, seder, we're going to need to understand their rules of speech until the person who is speaking will reach his goal. He'll actually come close to proper communication and not further away from it. Now I'm going to explain all the laws, the rules and the laws according of each one of these aspects. Okay, so that's pretty exciting. That's what he's going to do. You ready?
Yep.
I sent you this? Yeah, I think I did. Right?
I think so, yeah.
I sent you the Sefer. I keep working on it because I'm one of the things I'm trying to do is visually. It's what I call visual rhetoric. It's actually not visual rhetoric. It's really very helpful in getting the picture of the Ramchal wants to say accurately by making this outline. Okay, because we can see it's very, very easy to get lost here. So let's try it. Let's see what he says. Perek Bet. Tzir hadaborim b'seichel sheyeh shalem tzarich sheyeh emiti uborur. If you want to communicate an idea, it has to be mushlam. It has to be, how do you say mushlam? Complete is not very good. It has to, okay, but we're going to use complete. Well, no, somebody's going to think of a better word. That means the tzir, the borim b'seichel, I'm sorry, the tzir in order to be complete, should be true and clear. Okay, if you want to transmit that thought to another person's mind, then you're going to have to work on two things, truth and clarity. How does Mesilas Yesharim start out? Very good. Wow. There it is. And he's faithful to his system, by the way. Okay, so so the two things we have to work on is truth and clarity. Now, what's the difference between truth and clarity? So one thing the Ramchal does is he presents his boxes and then he defines each one of them. Perisho, what does that mean? Sheyeh k'fi mashu hadavar. I think that should have been k'mitzio tov emes. Okay. Truth means that you are saying something as it really is, as it exists. Lo pachas lo yoter. You're not saying, you're not describing the concept with an insufficient picture, or a picture that's too over-elaborated. That's what it means true. In other words, you're saying exactly what it is. If you're defining man as a Baal Chai Medaber, it means he's an animal who speaks. You don't say he's an animal that walks. That would be too little. Or he's an animal that, or an animal that breathes. Okay, a lot of things breathe. Okay, so you have to describe what you're trying to communicate in truth, not greater and not less. You have to define exactly what you are trying to present. What does birur mean? It has to be clear and not mixed up. Okay, so when you're trying to communicate the idea, it has to be presented in a way that you put first things first, second things second, and you don't mix up the levels into a hodgepodge. Dahainu, what does that mean? Shiyitzareu chelakav kol echad b'medrega sam. He says it clearly. All the divisions of the concept that you're trying to express has to be properly graded, okay, gradated, as we see in these organizational charts of the Ramchal. He starts from the klal and then he goes to the prat, as he's told us many times. So you have to be very careful. He says, with the nosei, the nasu kasharim b'chol gvulav, kamo shezacharno b'higayon. You have to be very careful that you are presenting the subjects, predicates, and their relationships and their definitions in the proper madrega, in the proper order, okay, going from the best way, as he presents always, from the klal to the prat, from the general to the particular, as he explained in Higayon. Why? Ki kol zman lo yatzir hadavar kain. If you don't present the information in a orderly way, ein tziro shalem v'nachon. So then the picture that you're trying to recreate in the other person's mind will not be complete and will not be correct. V'im yitzura achalakav kulam ish lo yeda. Let's say you do explain all the proper pieces of the subject that you're trying to explain. Im lo yukar kol echad mehem mashuhu uma midrega sam b'davar hametzuyav. If you don't clearly define each part and what its relationship to the other parts are, lo nikra lezeh yediyas hadavar hu be'emes, and you're not really communicating the true idea of what you're trying to express. Ve'ein ze ela kamisha roa gufim rabim mirachok asher lo yavchin behem v'lo yamod al amitam afal pi sheroisam nishtachas al panei kulam. It's like someone who would see a lot of different objects from the distance, but cannot understand what they are and whether it's true or not, because even though they're all there. In other words, you see disparate parts, but since they don't represent a consistent whole, so it's not going to give you a true concept. Since they're just the parts are there, but not in the proper organized manner, so you'll get a lot of unusual ideas about the relationship of the parts. Because you're very distant from them, and what he actually sees. So if you see a whole bunch of pieces, like you have a puzzle, right? You know, these little puzzles the kids put together. So if you just see a whole bunch of pieces and you don't see any pattern and any organizational form of them, so that you just can dream that this piece goes with that piece and this piece with that piece. But if the information is properly ordered and presented from the klal through the prat all the way down to Madregas, so then you'll be able to transmit a complete idea. And that's what the Ramchal is doing in all the works that he does, whether it's Mesil Shisharim or the Kabbalah or Sefer Higayon or Sefer Melitza. He's very careful that he breaks things down into an organized chart. We call it an organization chart, okay? Because then the material can be handled in a very systematic way. Ulam. Let's see. Maybe we'll just Ulam stop here. But Ulam Moshatzir lo yushlam el b'dibur hazeh gam hadibur lo yushlam sulaso. Just like the picture that you want to broadcast won't be complete unless it's emet and boro. So kain adibor lo yushlam bilto. So your speech also, not only the concept that you have, not has to be emet and boro, but also the language that you use, if you're not carefully organizing your material, won't be complete either in your communication of ideas. Now here's a very important principle here. Ki hare ein hadibur ela hagaat hatziyur b'seichel hamadaber el seichel hashamea. What is language? Language is the transmission of the picture that you have in your mind to the mind of the listener. That's where this phrase, thought, word, thought formula comes into the world. I mean, comes into this, what we used to say in Rabbi culture, say the yeshiva, he got someone else, doesn't really matter. But the point is that your language is the medium to transmit the concepts that are in your mind. V'kol zman shelo yeh borur umetukan k'fi amitis hatziyur hine lo nema shehu megala oso be'emes v'lo yegia oso el shamo be'amito. So as long as your language is not properly fixed, so then the concept will never be able to be translated clearly in truth in the other person's mind. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I always find it interesting. I mean, after we started talking about these ideas, how you could be talking to somebody, an idea pops into your head in like a split second, and then it could take you sometimes, 5, 6, 10 minutes to be able to put it into words for the other person to hear your idea, and it just like pops into your head in a second. You don't even really have to sometimes think too long for an idea to come to form.
Right. Right. So we're going to, the Ramchal is going to take us through that problem, the problem of why don't those ideas that we understand just fly across to the other person. So the answer is we have something called speech. Now, there's also another part he's going to talk about, and that's why this book is so important, because there's also blocks, learning disabilities, blocks that people have to hearing. Okay? Right. Either they don't have the proper tools to hear what you're saying. Okay, so there's two parts that that the Ramchal is going to really talk about. It's the book is written beautifully, and it has such important information here. I'm constantly amazed at the Ramchal. I just am constantly his clarity of, and he says it here. This clarity of understanding and presentation are unsurpassed. I really haven't read anyone who has this ability to so clearly define his subject and to break it down and to communicate it clearly. Now, it does take, of course, work, because he's talking about organization of a complex idea, but he is a master. The Vilna Gaon, of course, right, when he came to Mesil Shisharim, said that he couldn't find next to word, I think, the first 3 chapters. And that's the Ramchal was a master communicator, unbelievable. And what's so interesting is he's handing us the tools to do it. Now, okay, we turn out to be Ramchals, fantastic, but it doesn't really matter wherever we fit in the levels of communication. We have to be aware of these tools so that we'll be able to understand why or how to get our ideas across, and where are the impediments that are stopping our communication on the side of the speaker and the side of the listener. And really, that's what this is all about. It's clear understanding and clear communication, and it's understanding what causes clear communication and what causes unclear communication. So it's phenomenal set of svarim, and I'm glad that we have the mamish the merit to learn it together. And as we go through the Sefer, we'll really get a lot of wisdom from the Ramchal. It's amazing that a person who went to the highest levels of mysticism and Kabbalah wrote these basic books on communication. Unbelievable. Baruch Hashem. Okay, let's in the time remaining we have now, let's focus on a little bit of Darkei Gemara and see how the uniqueness of that Sefer is understanding the style of the language and how it communicates its ideas. Because as we said here, there's the thought formula, but the way you communicate your ideas, the manner that you communicate your ideas are very, very important. A lot of people may fall in learning Gemara because they don't get the style. The Chazon Ish, who was very fond of Darkei Gemara, said that people think when they come to Gemara that they're reading a letter, they're reading a story, and they don't understand that there's a very brief form being used by the Chachamim, number one, and number two, the Chachamim are speaking on a very advanced level. It's an expert text. They, like he says in Darkei Gemara, Zil Korei Be'Ravhu. There's a level called Korei Be'Rav, which is that you go to Cheder and you learn what the texts say, the words. But then you have to understand what the words mean through comparing text to text and understanding the svaras that generate those texts. Okay, so the way to that's done is through a process of argumentation. That's what the Ramchal tried to explain to us in Der Tfunos, and that's what the Darkei Gemara is trying to do here. He's trying to explain to us the rules that are being used in order to do this process that we call learning. So let's go now to the Darkei Gemara.